Hi, everybody. Hope today finds you healthy, happy, and holy. And yes, I'm wearing the same Indian shirt because I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I know. We're just waiting. Hopefully soon we'll be able to play in the season, and maybe this is our year too. That'd be really wonderful. Be great. So hopefully you're doing well. And again, our book, Love is Patient, but I'm not. Oh man, is that true? I don't know. The more I'm reading this, the more I'm finding out about that. But good insights, good insights. Again, Christopher West, expert in the theology of the body, and writes this for married couples, but for all of us and all relationships that all of us have. Patient, being patient, suffering with, enduring with, walking in another's shoes, as I talked about. And again, just a reminder, don't pray for patience. Don't do it. Because if you do, the saints always said you're going to get all kinds of ways to practice it. And, but recognize the ways that we can grow in patience and pray for. We might have more and more of the Spirit of the Lord, and the Lord's looking. And as He's going to be talking about in these chapters, we're going to do chapters 5 through 9. You're going to be talking about unconditional love. God loves us unconditionally, and we don't. Not only do we not love ourselves, we don't always love our sisters and our brothers, and we view them with the filter of our way of looking at things the way things should be, in a way, and he talks about in here too, making us God rather than letting God be God, and letting go and letting God in our lives. Again, love is a decision. Make that choice. I'll put this over here. So we'll do chapters 5 through 9, and next time we'll finish the rest of the book, chapters 10 through the end, and we'll finish that and see how we do and how we've grown. Just get a little, see some of my rocks and minerals and fossils and shells and stuff, and my priest trolls up there. That's the color, the blue and the yellow and the orange up there. So anyway, surrounded in my office here. I wish we were all together, and hopefully we will be soon. So let's see how we can do it. Chapter 5, love is not arrogant. Love is not arrogant. He says on page 31, Pope Francis said, I was, all those lessons and being as cool as I had imposed on my wife, came just as Pope Francis says, from my own puffed up sense of knowledge and self-importance. From a very early age, we're taught and we're trained to be self-reliant and selfish, and do our best. Many of us were in a time where you better do your best, and hopefully you get straight A's all the time. And if you don't, what's wrong, with you? You're not working hard enough. No, we're all different. We all just have different things. He says on page 31 as well, he says, I realize that what really makes us important, as Pope Francis says, is a love that understands, shows concern, and embraces the weak. What really makes us important is a love that understands, shows concern, and embraces the weak. It's an opportunity. So, Lord, how can I embrace the weak when I am off and loathe my own weaknesses and hide them behind masks of having it together? It's particularly true for men. It's true for all of us. We all wear masks, wanting to look, very positive, we want people to like us, to belong, and all those things. But weakness is especially difficult, I think, for men a lot of times to admit, because you're supposed to be strong. And strong also then for your wife, your children, all women, men aren't supposed to be weak. Big boys don't cry. No, not so. A lot of times crying is an opportunity to show we care and we feel with. And again, we're walking in another's shoes and we're empathetic. So being vulnerable, is not necessarily the most easy thing for men and really all people, but also in sports as well. You gotta lord it over others, and you gotta be better than, and the competition and all of those things that all of us, men and women, every one of us works at, but not to show weakness. And oftentimes, the whole idea was, well, you go to the weak spot. If you find someone who can't cover your wide receiver, you keep going to that wide receiver until they figure out a different scheme or get a different person in there or whatever. You look for the weakness in sports. whatever it is. If a guy can't hit a curveball, maybe that's what you throw him all the time. You know, the weakness. We all have weaknesses, and we're all vulnerable in a lot of ways. And the saints recognize this, and we are all called to recognize this. On page 32, how do I feel about myself if my weaknesses are on display? None of us like that. But what is my attitude toward others when I observe their weaknesses? That's the whole other point too. You know, do we just feel sorry for them? Do we avoid them? Do we, pick on their weaknesses at times? And oftentimes, and again, in any competitive situation, whether it's sports or business, or even just, being the most popular or the most liked or whatever it might be, so often we tend not to be empathetic with people's weaknesses. And so this chapter, talking about not being arrogant, not lording it over others, but recognizing who we are, strengths, weaknesses. We are children of God, we belong to the Lord, and we're loved by God. Chapter 6, love is not rude. Interesting reflection. He said the deeper love is, on the bottom of page 36, the deeper love is, the more it calls for respect for the other's freedom, the ability to wait until the other opens the door to his or her heart. To wait. Respect another's freedom. Not bang the door and say, well, you should believe this, or you better believe this, or, only the good people believe what I believe in, and you need to be like me and like us and all of that. But to recognize, our need to know and try to reach out to others. Love is not rude. Don't be rude to another person. Respecting ourselves and others. Respecting all of life. We say from conception till natural death, but it's to recognize where a person is in life. Whether they're a little child and they're still learning and growing, and in that self-centeredness. Some of us, even into the 82, 102, are still self-centered in a lot of ways. It's part of being human, and maturity is recognizing both our limitations, our weaknesses, but our strengths as well, and trying to build on those. On page 39, when we demand a spouse fill the void that only God can fill, the icon becomes an idol. Our spouse is not God, we're not God. We are called to see God in ourselves and those around us. To love another is to see the face of God. Les Mis, my favorite line from that play. Pope Francis says the principle of spiritual realism in marriage, the interior freedom to release the other person from the burden of completely satisfying my needs. It's complementarity, it's balance. For prayer, the fathers of the church tell us is nothing but becoming a longing for God. Prayer is a longing for God. Longing in our hearts. Our hearts are restless until they rest in Thee. What we've always heard talked about Augustine. Love respects the freedom of others. What do I want in my relationship? Do I fail to respect the freedom of others around me, spouse and others? In what ways have I returned to human relationships to fill the void in me that only God can fill? Again, expecting others to do this or that or the other thing. And sometimes that comes in recognition and praise, and everybody thinks that this is the greatest and whatever. Or, in spouse, that they're perfect. There's no perfect spouse. You can't be. We're human. We're imperfect. The only perfect one is God. And called our spouse at times, obviously, Jesus the bridegroom, us the church, the bride, and how we are called to be more and more like the Lord, to be at one with the Lord, but not expecting somebody else around us to be perfect. So what can we do? On page 40, it says, we can offer a kind look, a smile, even a word of gratitude. Love calls us to overcome my negative attitudes towards others. So being positive and encouraging. I always say turning negatives into positives, blessings and gifts. The attitude of gratitude, again, being able to show that, turning negatives into positives. Extremely, extremely important in our lives. Chapter 7. I laugh. On page 43, he says, I love food. It's amazing how possessive I can be at a dinner table about that particular piece of lasagna or a piece of, whatever it might be, a chicken or dessert, or perhaps I might even say chocolate. I know I've been there with my niece and nephews and my great nephew now at times, and there's a box of chocolates, and I really want to have the first pick because I think I know the one that I really like where it is. I'm not sure. Sometimes I might be wrong, like Forrest Gump says, life is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Oh, we think we're going to get something. But on the other hand, I want to be first at times. I'm still a little kid in some ways. Well, okay. Yeah, if it's only chocolate, if it's one thing. And hopefully allowing the other person priority before us. Respecting another enough. Love does not insist on its own way, chapter 7 says. We need to allow others to be themselves. There's a balance in that. It doesn't mean that we put ourselves down or we constantly, we have to keep our balance. And sometimes in marriage, for instance, one person does so much for the other. And I don't mean when they're sick or in need or something, but does so much, then it's expected that it's one-sided. You don't want someone to be a doormat. After all, we're not acquiring marriage. And he kind of alludes to this in the book. When he was getting married, it was like almost acquiring a wife. I need a wife to make me more complete when I have a family and all of that. But on the other hand, it's not acquiring a husband or wife, but it's a mutual. It's a giving of self. And we need to respect them. We don't get rid of ourselves entirely. We give ourselves to another freely. Again, it's a decision, is what really this whole chapter talks about. It's not like, because you're my wife this, or because you're my husband, you better do that. And our expectations and all of that. Okay, he said, I couldn't believe my ears when he talked with his wife. He said, run that by me again. You're telling me that you were hoping to marry me for all that time, but when you found out that he and another person wanted to be together but couldn't be, you started praying that she and I would get together. Wanting the best for the other person is what he said, even if it's an ex-girlfriend or almost dating. But, that's really giving of self. Wanting the other person to be so happy that we're willing to let ourselves not be lessened. Because love means you lay down your life and your own desires for the good of the other, she said. That's what his wife said to him. Well, that's why I did it, because I want you to be happy. I can love you. I can love you. They talk about a couple of examples, like a bird in a cage. I say, well, it's my pet and I take care of it and all that. But it's not really free until we let it go. And I'm not saying go out and let your birds out of the house or anything, or dogs or cats that are really more inside and we want them safe and stuff. But anyway, if something is just sort of kept, it's really not free. We need to allow everyone around us, our sisters and our brothers, to be who they are. Again, not destructively or not physically or emotionally or even spiritually harming us in a very serious way, but to really let them be them. Not making somebody a doormat or being a doormat, but giving of ourself. It's a choice. It's not just my way or the highway, but a higher way. The higher way in marriage and in relationships is God's way. God is totally giving and totally loving. I mean, God could have done so many other things in so many different ways, and God didn't. He gave free will. Adam and Eve kind of messed it up there a little bit. I know it would have been me. I know if it's chocolate in the garden, forget it. I'm sorry. But again, we're human, and we've all done those kinds of things. And the Lord still loves us, giving us choice. He doesn't just say, oh, that was a mistake. Let me get rid of him and start all over again. That's not what the virus is about, okay? But he's there to tell us, each and every one of us, how special we are and how we have that free will. We get to choose him. He loves us so much that he allows us to choose not to love him. We can do that. We can do that. We can choose to be apart from God. And sometimes we choose ourselves selfishly or choose whatever it is we know we shouldn't be doing or it isn't the best thing to do or in our best or other people's interest. But, God allows us to make those choices, and he still loves us unconditionally, and he's there with open arms, like the forgiving, the loving Father. to welcome us back and to invite us to know more and more the kingdom. On page 50, this is, I've been watering. Okay, watering the seeds of irritation in our lives. Interesting. All of these things. Singing his wife's praises. Another fault of my own line. She's a procrastinator, his wife. Wendy is, he says. Okay. And so he allows herself, we water those little seeds of irritation. Why doesn't she just think and behave like me? Seems the easy way out of my irritation. But Pope Francis says the combination of two different ways of thinking can lead to a synthesis that enriches both. So on page 50, it's complementarity. We complement one another. Maybe what our weaknesses are our spouses or someone around us, their strength. Recognizing that and taking advantage of that, and vice versa. Marriage was not entered into as a project to be worked. Oh, we need to realize that, that marriage was not, in their marriage, was not entered into as a project to be worked on together. We need to know that. We're work in progress. Number one, we're all different. I like to say some are more different than others. That just means they're more different than me, that's all. But we're all different. It's not right or wrong necessarily. I mean, unless, some very horrible, terrible things or something, that's sort of obvious. But usually not right or wrong. If someone, is a little bit more on time and someone is less. Someone's a little bit, more nervous or anxious or worried, and some people are more self-assured. Some people are more, we're all different, and we're all works in progress, and we're there to help one another. So people are different. I mean, we know that, but we forget that, and we don't always live that. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Interesting thing to say about anger here. Anger is a feeling or an emotion. It means there's something going on. There's, in our lives, something annoys us, upsets us, offends us, whatever it might be. And sometimes we should be. Sometimes we should because, something isn't right at all. Somebody's doing something wrong. And, certainly as a parent, we need to correct, but do it lovingly and understandingly. But anger in and of itself, Jesus got angry. He got angry at the injustices he saw in the courtyard. They were selling and they were gouging people and cheating people and so many different things. And they were doing it on the outside of the temple, which they should have been removed from there. And be more honest, be more kind. Don't cheat people like my mother and my stepfather who are coming to the temple to present their children. But anger is just a feeling or an emotion. What do we do when we're angry? We yell, we scream, we swear, we get into a fight. We take it out on another, we hold a grudge. So anger, we don't want to let it fester and be there and boiling up. He says, for instance, if someone cuts me off in traffic, he said, he likes to pray. A lot of you know this, and I've told people this. If someone does cut me off on a day, I say, keep one hand on the wheel, With your other hand, bless them. Blessing is going both ways. They need it, and I need it. And, it's just a reminder, maybe they're worried or anxious about something. Maybe they're on their way to visit somebody who's sick or in need. It's not just that they're better than us or their car is faster than us or they, don't care about us. That happens. But even so, then they do need to be blessed and they need help. But so do I in my response to it. So getting angry is a little red flag for us, perhaps. A little sign. Notice, what is it in my life? Why am I angry about that? And how should I respond to that? Maybe not as so much with anger, but with understanding, compassion, care, and with prayer. Okay, love is not resentful. Opportunities in life, he said, being resentful. My confessor has pointed out to me that I like to think this is a virtue when in fact it is pure vice. What is it? Oh. Okay, I gotta start over. Page 59. Today we recognize that being able to forgive others implies a liberating experience of understanding and forgiving ourselves. That's Pretty important. Very important in our lives. We need to forgive, be able to forgive ourselves. My confessor was pointing out to me that I like to think this is a virtue, when in fact it is pure vice. The self-condemnation, putting ourselves down. Okay, not forgiving ourselves. No, that's really vice. Self-condemnation is one of the twin towers of sin in my life. The other is self-reliance. I can do it on my own, and I'll call upon God if I really, for something really major, supernatural or something. But he says, in a way, I'm a practical atheist. Rather than knowing that I need to walk in prayer and walk with the Lord, that, letting go and letting God in my life. What do I need to do in my life to allow that to happen? And not just say, well, I'm good on my own, and if I'm not, okay, I'll call upon you, God, like an equal rather than a creature and rather than someone who God tremendously loves. So we need to forgive ourselves. If you don't forgive yourself, you can't forgive another person, really. We need to understand and know forgiveness. That's what all of Jesus' parable. He uses the woman caught in adultery, I know, as an example of that. Okay, because really what it is, if we try to do things on our own, that second of the vices, self-reliance, practical atheist. We need to let go and let God, because otherwise it really is pride. We're making the God of my life is being in control and recognizing I'm not in control. God is in control. I can make choices and decisions, and hopefully good ones, with the Holy Spirit's encouragement and strength and wisdom. But, it's not, hey, I'm good on my own until here or there, here every once in a while, Lord. No. We need to let God be in control of our lives, using the gifts and talents we have, our ability to think, our wisdom, other people around us, spiritual guides and directors and so on, and prayer, and the example and witness and the support of spouses and children and family and friends. In the gospel, the very root of sin, this theologian Olivier Clement on page 60 said, the very root of sin is the pretense that we can save ourselves by our own effort. No. We need to recognize our weaknesses and recognize our need for forgiveness and allow the Lord to forgive us. There's a very famous book called Allowing Ourselves to be Forgiven, and in it they use the example of Peter and Judas. Peter and Judas did pretty much the same thing, although Judas did it originally for money and then felt so bad. But he could not allow himself to be forgiven after he realized what he had done. Oh my gosh. And so he took his own life because he couldn't allow God to forgive him for what he had done. He realized the immensity of that and his failure and his weakness and his pride and greed and all of those things. But he couldn't allow himself to be forgiven to go on. But a couple other saints, Peter did it. He denied Jesus 3 times. The only reason we know about that, I believe, is because that was his teaching in the early church. He talked about that. Look what I did. Look what I did. And God loved me. And look, he called me to go out there. And in his name, I can heal people. In his name, not in mine. I am so weak. I'm an instrument in the Lord's hands. I didn't even deserve to die like he did. So he died upside down on the cross. He allowed himself to be forgiven, which meant that he could be more forgiving and more loving and gracious as well in his life because he let Jesus forgive in and through him. Another example, of course, of that is St. Paul, the greatest Christian killer perhaps that ever lived. And he was converted, knocked off his high horse, and then, he became the greatest missionary. He allowed himself to be forgiven, not just to dwell on the fact, oh, look what I did, look how I hurt God and the church. Why are you persecuting me, Jesus says. But he allows himself to go on. On page 61, it says, we need to learn to pray over our past history, to accept ourselves, to learn how to live with our limitations, and even to forgive ourselves in order to have the same attitude toward others. Forgive yourself. We need to do it. On page 63, each of us, as Pope Francis observes, is an unfinished product, needing to grow, a work in progress. Yep, no matter how young or how old we are, we're a work in progress. And not just as we physically grow, but emotionally and spiritually as well. We are called to do some spiritual distancing. As we're doing social distancing, hopefully this is a good opportunity to reflect on our lives. Who are those people that have hurt us through life? He talked about his brother, his big brother, and trying to, meet his standards. And then what he did is he took it out on other people. in his life. We need to recognize why we do certain things as much as we can, or why we don't do other things, to allow ourselves to let the Holy Spirit lead and guide us, to let Jesus be more in our lives. We're a work in progress. We're working on it. And that's the wonderful thing. We're working on it. We're not a finished product. We're not done and we're just waiting. Okay, hey, anytime, Lord, I'm ready to be with all the saints in your kingdom. Hopefully we are ready all the time. But, there's more, as they say. There's always more. On page 63, each of us, as Pope Francis continues to say then, we need to work on that. Love is not resentful. Sometimes we are, Lord. Teach us how to love in our lives. Page 64. Again, God's unconditional love is the foundation of absolutely everything the church is. That's what he says Pope Francis's message is to the world. God's unconditional love is the foundation of absolutely everything the church is. Hence, it is a fundamental gift the church has to offer to share with the world. Unconditional love. God loves us unconditionally. We are all children of God, brothers and sisters. We're all weak human beings. We all have faults and failings, and we all need forgiveness. But we can all be instruments of the Lord and the Lord's forgiveness and love. What we can be is, on page 66, mercy. We are all in need of it. We celebrated Divine Mercy not too long ago. And of course, a lot of people pray the Divine Mercy, the chaplet and everything. Mercy. Mercy. God's tremendous love. Merci in French. Thank you. The gratitude we need to have, the attitude of gratitude for the Lord and the ways that we can share God's holiness and God's life. Bottom of page 66. As Pope Francis observes, if I accept that God's love for me is unconditional, then I'll become capable of showing that same boundless love and forgiveness to others. We're not God, but we can be more and more like God. Unconditional love. I'm not setting conditions on you. I love you when you did this, or as long as you do that, or whenever, you don't do this other thing. I love you because, you have faults, failings, weaknesses, but so do I. We can love one another and try to see, again, God in us, in the other, especially in our spouse, but in everybody around us, in all. As St. Teresa of Avila, as we talked about during Lent, we are the eyes, the hands, and the feet of Jesus. We bring Jesus to our world by bringing ourselves, by letting Jesus in us move through us unconditionally in God's love to everyone else. Let's practice all of these things. We'll finish the book, chapter 10 through the end next week. I hope you're healthy, happy, and holy, and have a wonderful week. Smile a lot. Do good things for those around you. Pray for someone who maybe is struggling at this time, physically or any other way. And for our first responders and medical personnel, let's ask the Lord, who loves us so much, to let us see his presence in us and in all around us even more. May God bless us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless.